So for myself, geometry is like a really hard concept because it's not black and white. And I see that that's something that comes into spatial aspects, which is one of the dimensions in geometry. And I believe that spatial aspects is probably one of the hardest things for students to learn because it's not a black and white concept. It's like you have to be able to visualize it. How do we put it back together? And I feel like spatial ability is something that could be taught at such an early age than probably what it's being taught at in the curriculum. I feel like it could be taught like even in kindergarten. You can lay out a triangle. The students might not know the 3D shape of a triangle, but they can point out like it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can hit like the very, very basics, and as they get older, you can have the vocabulary introduced. You could have the harder concepts introduced. That's why I think spatial ability should be taught right off the bat, and something that should be introduced at a very early age. As at that age, their brains can learn and hold so much information from kindergarten through second grade that is their primary years, I believe. So that's why I think it's very important that we hit those concepts and we hit it at the very basics. With that being said, for me, geometry was a joke growing up. So I barely remember it in grade school. And then in high school, when I took geometry, the teacher was completely checked out. She was retiring, so she didn't want to teach at all. So with that being said, would have tests, but the smartest kid in the class would do it, and we would just take the answers, just so she would have test grades. So I passed geometry probably with an A or a B, but I didn't have to try in that class, or I didn't have to learn it. So geometry is a very hard concept, but being in this class, reading about geometry and actually teaching it and seeing where my students struggle has helped me gain a more of an understanding of geometry and how little it is actually still taught in the education system. I feel like geometry it's taught at the very end of the school year. So kids are checked out, the teachers checked out. We're just ready for school to be done. So the concept of math and geometry is kind of just out the door. They're teaching it just to teach it in a sense. So I feel like it should be taught in the curriculum sooner than later, and I think that something should change in the education curriculum because geometry, like I said, is not truly taught. So if we can implement it in ways that it is being taught throughout the whole year, I think students will get a better and more stronger hold on what geometry is. With that being said, like with my students, I realized well, we have weeks that come up that we only have 2 days out of the week. We're already ahead in our math program and our math curriculum. So why not take like next week, 2 days? We're going to just go and review 4th grade geometry standards. And I got a 4th grade book, and we're just going to go back to the last 2 chapters and kind of just re-hit some of those points and like geometry. So I definitely think it's something that needs to be taught kind of almost all year round because there's so much that also goes into geometry, just like how there's so much that goes into multiplication, so much goes into decimals, so much goes into fractions. We still have to teach geometry the same way, but we take more time in our curriculum to teach the algebraic thinking than we do to teach any type of the geometry or measurement and data concepts, which is something that students also need to know. The use of technology is something that I love that has grown not in just in geometry and in the math world, but in the education as a whole. I love using the app called Prodigy because I go through and I can break down the scales and I can see, okay, well, this student needs a little bit more help in like adding and subtracting fractions, where my other student is struggling with, let's just say, place value. So I can go in and set standards and assessments and assignments to meet those needs and hit those concepts again while it's a fun learning activity. So a lot of times my students like to go home and play Prodigy at home as homework, and I'm totally fine with that because at the end of the day, I am targeting lessons that the students need to review or need to be reintroduced to. So I really like Prodigy and the use of technology and some of the apps that we have that you have shown us, not apps, but some of the websites that you have shown. I actually have shown some of my students and they just love it and they love to go on and play with it. And that's kind of like what I want them to do. I just want them to go on and explore and look at it. They might not understand why it's important, but they're introduced to it, and that's huge. Being introduced is the first step to anything, to getting to do something different or to do something new or better. So that's my reflection on the geometry reading and how I feel like it connects to their curriculum and their school setting and everything in between. So